Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It is serendipitous that the first speech I give back in this chamber upon my return from parental leave after the birth of my twins is a speech about Edith Cowan, who got elected 100 years ago on the weekend and on the day of the March for Justice in Canberra. I know many of us, if not all of us on this side of this House, will be marching down to the grass as soon as we take our leave from this chamber, because I think, if anything, Edith Cowan would want to know 100 years on that we fight and we advance her legacy still. If anything, it's disappointing that we have only gotten this far. But let's take stock at where we are. Edith Cowan herself was a trailblazer, and she dedicated her life to promoting and advancing the rights and welfare of women and children, guided by her belief that economic independence and higher education was an avenue of hope, something we still fight the fight for day in, day out in this place. She also, 100 years ago, argued about the need for women in leadership rather than just their right to see it, a debate we continue to have today, 100 years on. When she stood as the Nationalist candidate for the Legislative Assembly in West Perth, her election pamphlet, in accordance with the practice of the day, referred to her as Mrs. James Cowan, after her husband. At least we've got rid of that, right? Knock one over. Despite being endorsed by the Conservative Party of the day, Edith Cowan felt that domestic and social issues were not being given enough attention, and she campaigned on her impressive community service record and said that we all needed to nag a little on social problems. And here we are, 100 years on, nagging still. She won a surprise victory. She won by 46 votes. She defeated the Attorney-General, who had actually introduced the legislation that enabled her to stand. That's politics. And in 1921, at the age of 60, she became the first woman elected to Australian Parliament. One sign that her presence in the chamber was uncomfortable for some members was evident in their refusal to even accord her with the tradition of silence for her maiden speech, even when she emphasised the necessity that exists for other women to come there too. And yet, here we are today, still talking about the culture of this place and what needs to be done for more women to feel more welcome. As a parliamentarian, Cowan admirably pursued her policy objectives without the apparent concern of electoral consequences. How novel. Or in favour of her party colleagues. She always voted in a way that would benefit, or at least not discriminate against, women and children. That is an absolute credit to her. She fought for the motherhood endowment, and she defended the idea of a housewives' union. Sounds like she belongs on our side, to be honest. She argued for the rights of wives to access the arbitration court. She also pressed for sex education in state schools, a debate somehow we are still having in 2021. And she chastised the Minister for Railways for the $1 shilling pram levy imposed on mothers who were travelling to the city for their shopping. The Minister interjected during that debate. It got pretty rowdy, but the Minister agreed to withdraw that fee that same day. She successfully introduced and passed without amendment her second private member's bill, the Women's Legal Status Bill. It was radical at the time. It allowed women in West Australia to practice law and other professions for the first time. And as a lawyer myself, 100 years down the track, I thank her. In introducing the Women's Legal Status Bill, which stated that no person could be disqualified from any public, civil or judicial function by sex, she paved the way for our current sex discrimination laws. And 2 years after her death, the Edith Cowan Memorial Clock was unveiled at the entrance to Perth Kings Park, believed to be one of the first civic monuments dedicated to Australian women, built in the face of persistent opposition, which has been characterised as representative of the gender bias operating at the time. And while a memorial clock is nice, the real monument to Edith Cowan's legacy is in this place right here, with the member for Cowan, the member for Lawler, and the member for Warringah, and the member for Curtin, and the member for Reid. And it is only because of trailblazing work, women like Edith, that we can all stand here today. And I think we owe it to her legacy, and to take our part in that ongoing legacy, to fight for those same principles that she fought for 100 years ago. It is at the same time horrifying and galvanising that 100 years on we must still fight for those principles, that those principles still stand at stake today. But they are, and so we do. We march on. We march out of this place and we march down to the grass, and we stand with women from across the country who ask us, as their elected representatives, to speak for them in this place. This isn't a political issue. This is a critical issue, and we are at a moment of reckoning across the country. It is us in this place who must listen to our people and must act to make sure that it actually means something for them back in their homes.